Victoria, I'm so grateful to have you on the podcast today. I love your work. I love what you're about. And I love your like unapologetic, just like out there, like with all of the stuff that you're doing around sex and intimacy. And so, yeah, I'm so excited to chat to you today.
Oh, thank you. I'm so grateful to be on.
So we have a lot, I think we have a lot to cover, and I really want to dive into things today. But for people who don't know what a somatic sexologist is, what is it? Because I'm also intrigued, because there's two of my favorite things in that already. Like I love body work, I love somatic work, and I love the concept and the idea and talking about sex and intimacy. So what do you do?
Yeah, so I mean, sexologist is pretty much what it says on the tin, right? So we're dealing with the modality of sex, and we're dealing with like, and the way that I like to talk about it is like eros. So for me, sex is really about our life force energy. So that energy that is like our life instinct to sort of get out of bed in the morning, to like want, it's the same instinct that drives us to breathe, to eat, to drink. It's like that instinct. And when we can cultivate that feeling of our life force, it gives us a more feeling of aliveness. And so that's really what I'm passionate around in the sex piece. For me, it's not about necessarily having, I mean, pleasure is a great part of that, but it's like, it's really about that feeling of just being alive that we really want to feel. So that's the part within sexology. And then somatic for me means like dealing with the body over the mind. So my belief is like, we spent a lot of time in the last like decades or so just really dealing a lot with the mind, especially in therapy. And I think what's happening is this shift of people starting to recognize that, like, you know, every thought we have comes back to an emotion, and every emotion comes back to a feeling, and the feeling comes back to a sensation. And so when we just actually get to the root of it and kind of come back to that sensation and just get okay that there's a sensation in the body, it really shifts the way that we start to you know, understand and journey the way that we're experiencing life. So for me, it's like, how do we create empowerment around dealing with the body over the mind, and using that life force energy to just charge it up even more and have more life in our lives.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And it's so interesting because when I started doing intimacy work and embodiment work, the feeling that I got was like, holy crap, like I didn't know how numb I was. Like I didn't know how lack of feeling that I felt in these areas of my body or in who I was, you know, and when you unlock them, it became this feeling of like, I feel alive. And so I love that that's what you do. And you touched on pleasure. So I really want to like dive into this, because I feel like it's a comment that comes up a lot for a lot of people. It's sometimes uncomfortable for people, especially if there's like a lack of pleasure within their bodies, themselves, or a lack of pleasure in their romantic relationship or in intimacy in general. So what do you find typically you work with on people that want to access more pleasure, be it with their romantic partner or with self-pleasure?
Yeah, well, I think actually, like, we deal with that question. You know, you said like, I think that pleasure is quite confronting for people, and I would agree. And like when we go into the piece that it's actually confronting, that usually unlocks the pleasure.
Mm.
So there's often like so much like conditioning we have around it, and also like a level of unsafety that we have with experiencing arousal and pleasure and these energies in our body, because they've made us feel unsafe in the past. And it's very uncommon for people to be able to feel like their pleasure or feel their desire or their arousal in any given moment, and almost know what to do with it. So I just teach people how to be with it in the body, and how to circulate it through the body and utilize that just to give them more life rather than to resist it. Because what we've been taught is like, okay, don't objectify somebody in the street because that's bad. And then if they know, that's even worse, you know, like it's like this idea that, you know, like feeling our desire and our pleasure is like the worst thing we can have, and we need to push it down and resist it. And, you know, it's like, actually, once you recognize that power is, it actually is your life force. It is that driving force. When you see somebody in their pleasure, they're in their most expressive, you know, like life-giving energy. So that's what we're creating, is this like, how do we get to the conditioning and just unravel that, and also not unravel that in like, oh, you know, what did your mum say about pleasure when you were 5? You know, it's not really that kind of journey for me. It's like,
Yeah.
how do we locate that sensation that we're actually resisting it and pushing it down, because we are so conditioned into it, don't even know we're doing it.
Yeah.
So then when we want to unlock it and we want to be with our partners and we want to feel that energy, it's been so resisted for so long, and it's got so many conditions around how we can feel it and what it can look like. that people can't actually access it.
Mm. So if somebody is like listening and they're like, oh my gosh, like that's me, like I feel like that, or even like to the point where you're like, I know that there's like more that I'm ready to feel. Where do people begin to start to unravel, I guess?
Mm-hmm. So this is kind of why I created this modality around self-pleasure. For me, self-pleasure is a little bit different from masturbation. So we've got like masturbation is where I'm going to come into my body and I'm going to have an orgasm, or I'm going to have pleasure, or I'm going to have of arousal of some sorts. And when we start to shift that perspective from um, our having to have some sort of goal of what the body shows up with, to actually just moving into like what I experience as self-pleasure. Self-pleasure is I'm going to come and be with the body and allow whatever's there to be felt and seen and journeyed.
Mm.
And that there's no attachment to whether that looks pleasurable or whether that just looks like some tears that are coming through. Maybe there's this sadness in the body, but or even it's sometimes it's just messages. Like the body holds like innate wisdom that we can access when we actually let go of the mind and come into the body. Like you hear people talk about, for instance, like the gut is the second brain.
Mm.
I actually believe that the gut is the first brain. So I
Mm.
actually feel like this is like a driving force for us more than anything else. And and the heart is part of that. So it's just like the heart and the gut and the sex center, like these really strong power centers in our body have so much more to share with us that the mind doesn't tell us. And our society is very mind driven. So
Mm.
when we actually let go of the mind and come back to the sensations and start to listen to the language of the sensations, which is beyond words and language itself, it actually gives us so much more to work with. So that's really where I take people on these journeys. It's like come into the take away the mind and come into the body and start to listen to the body. And the body has so much sensation going on, and when you start to just be with those sensations with sound, breath, movement, touch, which is like the basis of tantric practices, it opens up a whole new gateway and understanding of how you receive your body, and from that how you receive pleasure.
Mm.
So if you're feeling this stuckness in your sex life and you're feeling like you can't have what you want, like can you take like 30 minutes out of your day to let go of the mind and be with the body? And a lot of the time that's quite uncomfortable for people because we don't know how to be with the body, and we have this idea of like, I don't know how to just be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so this is what this whole modality is about, is teaching people how to just be with their body.
Mm. And so what would that look like for somebody? Because um, you know, I talk about this a lot as well. And what I do is like helping people move from the head to the heart. And some people are still like, what does that mean? Like, and I forget that sometimes I talk a lot in my own language and I'm like, oh yeah, people don't understand what I'm talking about. So breaking it down even further, if someone was to take 30 minutes out of their day to disconnect from their mind for a second and really be with their body, be with the emotion, be with whatever sensations coming up, what would they need to do to create that space to really go there, or to really assist themselves in going there, maybe that they've never even accessed before? Like, do they need to like have a sacred space? Do they need to like do like put on certain music? Like, what would be like the thing that somebody literally needed to do?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, there is all those things, right? That's like the bells and whistles. So, like, yeah, for sure. If you want to create a sacred space and if you want to listen to a great playlist, like I have all of those things, like on my website, like, and on my Instagram, if people want to access those pieces, I have all those things for them. But do you need that? Like, I feel like, again, we're kind of looking at the external things that we need to just have the internal experiences, right?
Mm.
And I agree that sometimes the external experiences help us go inwards, but like it kind of like, if you were to ask me like what is actually needed, it's just time and patience,
Mm.
and also like an understanding of like, sometimes I think an understanding of like what to look for, because it's like the brain, it takes a while to really like go to like settle. So sometimes I think actually just giving people the tools to go, right, here's what a sensation might feel like. It could be heat, it could be coolness, it could be tingling, it could be vibration. It could be just like a heaviness in some area of your body, maybe in the lower belly. It could be a heaviness in the heart, it could be tension in the chest. And that's like the first place to look, like I sometimes say like, right, if you close your eyes, where's the strongest sensation that you feel in your body? And then we go to that place. Let's say I might just do it for you now. Like if I close my eyes, take a big breath. Yeah, there's sort of it's almost like a pulling and a tension here for me on my collarbones right now. So it's just, who knows, it doesn't mean anything. It's just, that's what's there for me in this moment. And so what I would then do is that as I'm connecting to that part of my body, I would just start to like maybe bring more touch and maybe like press on these areas, or maybe I might like vibrate my fingers to sort of bring a little bit more life to this area. Maybe I'll make a big sigh just to like release whatever that, if it feels like tension, sometimes sighing can help. So I'll just like, a little bit of sound. So anything really, it's just like, how do I just be with the sensation using sound, breath, movement, and touch? And so this is, sometimes I say it's like the place to go to before meditation. Like it's very intense for a lot of people to go, right, I'm just going to sit and do nothing and be in the nothingness. And so I actually believe that this is like a place to go before meditation. And for me now, like my self-pleasure practice can journey into an almost a meditation, because my belief is like this eros, this experience of like erotic energy or like pleasure energy that we feel in the body is actually comes from the stillness. Like if you've ever thought about like when you're about to have a kiss with somebody, right? It's like those moments where you share a first kiss with somebody, it goes silent in the space, like stillness, and then all of a sudden you feel this urge to lean in and kiss somebody, right? So all of that erotic energy and all of that beautiful, bubbling excitement actually comes from the stillness that we find in our bodies.
Oh, I just got goosebumps when you said that. Yeah. And, and I want to go back to when you said like what's needed is like time and patience, because there's almost this like 2 minutes has passed, and when you're trying to sit by yourself can feel like 2 hours, and then it's like you just tap out. You're like, no, this isn't for me. I can't do this. And that the patience thing is so key, and I really want to draw that out, because if somebody's just starting this process or someone's ready to advance their way into something deeper, it requires so much almost discipline to sit in this space, even though you want to reach out to do something else. Even if you want to reach for your phone, or you want to just like be like, no, I'll do it later, or you just want to, there's all these stuff. And I think that almost is like the monkey mind that's trying to distract you from that comfort, that you're about to exit out of the comfort zone, and so we're going to try and stop you to keep you safe. It's almost that kicks in, and so all of these ideas will come up in our heads, and it's like, how do you just like allow them to be there and still stay? And I think that's so important. That's what I've learned in these practices, is that, yeah, they're uncomfortable, and it's taken a lot of discipline and patience to stay with it for the 30 minutes, because that's when you get the most out of it.
Mm-hmm. So this is actually how I experience it myself, even still. Like I still have those times when I want to reach my phone, or I want to get up and go and do something else. And because like, the level of discomfort, like you just said, like for me, like the framing of knowing that this is the journey, like like one of the way that when I say this is like a self-pleasure modality is because what I'm actually teaching people is how to be with that, and what we created, I've got like a lot of practitioners now of this self-pleasure modality, and what we do is actually hold witness for that, and hold witness for that process, and allow for like every part of a person's body to come online. And the way that I explain it is, you said that your last podcasts were a lot on the masculine feminine energies, and it's very similar really with self-pleasure. It's like, for me, it's like this, there's a very much a chaotic energy to our emotions, right? We can, if we were very expressive and we want to like cry or scream or like whatever the experience is of the emotion, that's when it's very dense and heavy. And then there's also like this pillar that we have of, which is like almost like our masculine energy, which I feel like is our awareness. And so it's like, for me, it's about managing those two pieces. It's like I'm managing my awareness as I'm also going into the depths of my experience. And the way that I teach this self-pleasure is like to be able to aspect with almost all these different parts of us and journey into it. So it's a lot of using like the modality itself is using pieces of sort of Gestalt therapy and which is all these like kind of counseling techniques that I've taken from the talk therapy world and then brought them into the body. And this is really just like how it unfolds. It's like, can you be with your observer while you're actually in the depth of your emotions as well? And this is like the training ground for that, and once we learn how to do that, and we actually start to emit our own frequency in everyday life. So so actually we become a lot less triggerable. So
Yeah.
like if somebody's mad at you or something and they come in and they start shouting at you, it's like your first, like the instant reaction for most people is to go, "Oh, I've done something wrong," and like you feel like you have to react or you have to do something. But
Mm.
once you've actually been with your body in this way for so long, when someone shouts at you, you start to go, okay, someone's shouting at me. Okay, how do I want to choose to be with that? Because your awareness becomes so much stronger as you journey your own emotions, because you get to go into your emotions and you get to journey how you're looking at these emotions and how you're feeling about them, you know? It's a powerful way of kind of just like looking at different angles of yourself.
I love this so much because I've had this exact experience, and what led me to begin to practice this was conjoining together a 20-minute meditation of stillness and just like complete silence and stillness, and then a 20-minute dance, like just like letting it flow, letting my body flow, right? And it's almost like I want to compare it to if you were speaking with somebody who was like, if you're a feminine being, right, like all in your emotion, in your chaos, excuse me, and you were speaking or standing in presence with somebody who is holding a really masculine presence and gives you that feeling of like, oh, I'm safe here and I feel grounded and I feel comfortable to express what's going on for me, right? It's like that feeling of safety with somebody else. This is what the practice has cultivated within myself, of like being able to do the meditation and the dance had then started to cultivate this feeling within me of like this strong masculine figure that's there and that's going, cool, I'm going to be here and hold you and make you feel safe and protect you while you go deeper into whatever your process is right now. And it just is like, we have these two energies within ourselves for a reason. And it's just, I think being able to cultivate exactly what you've just said allows us to feel safer to go into our own process with nobody else to witness that. So I think it's so important that we look, and that's why I'm passionate and did a whole season 2 on the masculine and feminine, because I think it's so beneficial for our own development, our own growth, our own like getting to know ourselves when we have both of them simultaneously working.
Agreed. And I think like it's just important just to share with your listeners as well. Like, you know, these masculine and feminine energies are inside all of us, you know,
Yeah.
like it's not something that we need to look outside of ourselves for, but because of our conditioning, it sometimes makes us feel like we do. So like as people that any people, like man or woman who has a lot of emotions, they want to look outside of themselves often
Mm.
to have some sort of experience of something else. But we have all these energies inside ourselves, and that's what the self-pleasure modality is about. You know, with sexuality, it can be very easy to like bypass what we're feeling to look outside of ourselves to have some sort of needs met. And like really this self-pleasure practice allows you to get really clear inside of yourself and more integrated so that you can go back outside and have more of an experience that is actually coming from a cup that's full rather than coming out of a cup that's like needing something, you know. And
Yeah.
this is where a lot of our sexual energy is stemming from nowadays in society. So when we're looking for something outside of ourselves, we'll create polarity with other people to create something, to resolve something inside of ourselves. And the
Mm.
self-pleasure modality helps you resolve things inside of yourself so you can come to a place of, you know, understanding of who you be and who you are when your cup is full. And then you can attract a partner that is much more fulfilling and life-giving rather than just here to teach you lessons, you know.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. So when you are working with people or people that are coming to you to look at deepening their self-pleasure or working on it, what do you find is like, if there's common things that show up that people are struggling with or the challenges, like what would be coming up for people to then want to come and work on it?
That what I just shared, one of them is like, you know, when people are having continually inviting in partners that are not serving them is one reason. Um, but I mean, I actually I would struggle to find anything that people can't use in this way, because every single thing that we think that we want in life comes back to wanting to feel a feeling.
Mm.
So let's say I want to be rich, I want a job that does that, doing something, or I want a partner, or I want to, you know, whatever the thing is that you want in life, it actually comes back to feeling a feeling.
Mm.
And when people are, if you know, if people are sitting there saying, I want to be rich, I want to be rich, I want to be rich, and I'm like, why am I not rich yet? Basically, it's like if we're actually feeling something inside of ourselves that's repelling that experience of actually having external wealth. So when we resolve that thing inside of ourselves to to unlock and to come back to a sense of like freedom within that feeling, then we actually open the space to receive things externally.
Mm.
And the same with partnership, right? You're like, oh, why haven't I met the one yet, or something like that. And it's just like, once we come back to ourselves and we find that peace in ourselves and connect to that feeling of oneness with ourselves, then we can actually create that externally, because we're a vibrational match for these things. And that's
Ooh.
what this is about, you know. So like, there's how do we resolve whatever is going on inside of ourselves to stop the blocks that we're experiencing externally. Those blocks could be with things that you would want, but they could also just be with like everyday life, you know. Like, a lot of people journeying you know, mental illness and like a feeling of just like density in the body.
Mm.
Like, it can be really like debilitating to be living with these experiences. And for me, this self-pleasure modality is just like another form of therapy when you've already tried all the things, you know. Like, you've already done talk therapy and you've spoken about all this stuff. It's just like, sometimes there's no words, sometimes there's just a feeling, and there's just a sensation that just wants to be within the body. And the more we can be with those sensations without putting words to it, without putting stories to why we feel it, without having to justify it, that's when we start to feel liberation and freedom from these experiences.
I hear that. So do you think that we could use self-pleasure as a way to manifest then?
Fully. Like, this is all part of the journey. Like,
I love
it's
this.
all about, right? So it's like, you know, the beginning part of this journey for most people, I said there's like 3 stages. Like, what I've boiled it down to, I wrote a book about this, and it's like, there's 3 stages to this journey. We got to clear through the past. So we're literally like, we're letting go of all that conditioning I spoke about at the beginning of this call. We're letting go of like what other people think of sound sex around us, or like what we've been taught and all that kind of stuff. And also like any kind of trauma that we've experienced. Like I'm like 99% of women that I meet, especially, have experienced some sort of trauma and violation of around their sexuality.
Mm.
And I don't know how the statistics on men, but it's also pretty high. It's And so it's about clearing through those pieces, letting go of that stuff. And then the second part that we have is around like getting like connecting to the present. So we've cleared in the past, connecting to the present. Connecting to the present is all about like becoming embodied. Because so like I said, when somebody's mad at me or something, because I have an embodied experience now, it's like when someone comes in and they're like yelling at me or something, my first instinct will go, okay, what's going on inside of my body?
Yeah.
How can I be with myself and the sensations in my body and choose how I want to act instead of reacting? So it's about moving out of that reactive space and into a state of action and a state of like, how do I want to show up in the world right now? And also having choice around that, because so many of us feel like we're actually just like, you know, victim to our sensations in our body. Like, all right, something's happened externally and now I feel sad.
Mm.
It doesn't, like, feelings don't come from external environment. It's just like we get to choose. There's things that like can create reaction, of course, but like we actually get to choose our feeling state, and we can get experience levels of emotions hitting us, but we get to choose our feeling state beyond that. So that's really about connecting to the present moment. How can we be able to be present here right now? And then once you've kind of like stepped through those 2 stages, which can be really big stages, it can take some time, or like, you know, people pick it up really fast as well. Like, it's just like different for everybody, is what I've experienced. And then this third stage is creating the future. So once you've mastered those 2 layers, that's when we start to get to play with that sex magic, you know. And that's when we start to like work with those vibrational frequencies of like, what is it that I'm calling in? What is it that I'm creating in my life? And
Mm.
it's like, this is a really potent phase, and this is what it's all about for me, is like, how do we get to that? And this is when I see like huge, like massive changes for people in their life, when they start to realize that like this vessel is just like here to create and attract what we want in life.
Oh, sex magic. Sounds so good.
So
So is the so what would that, like, if somebody's done the first 2 steps, you know, and you in a really comfortable place, you've got a really solid self-pleasure routine going on, you're starting to find that what you're attracting and getting in life is more along to what you want, you know, when is the process of stepping into the sex magic, like, and what does that mean, what does that look like?
Okay, so like how I was explaining to you, like you know, like it still comes up for me if I'm having a really hard day and I come into my self-pleasure practice. and I'm like, might have that feeling of wanting to like pick up my phone or go and do something else. It's like, it's almost like you're journeying all three of those steps in your self-pleasure practice.
Mm.
So like coming into my self-pleasure practice, I might be like, I have to take some time to sort of clear through whatever's going on in my body. So by using the connection to my body, letting go of the mind, coming back into the body, sound, breath, movement, touch, full connection to the self in that space. And it's almost like what I'm doing in that is actually just clearing the space. So I'm almost like, like emptying the vessel, you know, like I'm transcending all of this, the density and all of the things that have happened in my day and all the things that are going on in my life. I'm just like clearing the body out. So it just becomes like this feeling of like stillness and emptiness. And then from there, and when I can get really present to those pieces, it's like what arises in that is like the purity of my life force. And this is like what I call eros. Like it's actually a term that like Freud coined in one of his books back in the day. And he calls this energy of eros like this life instinct. So that instinct to like just get up and be and do and like live life to the fullest. Like that's the energy of our life force energy. So what we're doing is wanting to connect to the purity of that energy inside of ourselves. And when we can connect to that experience, it starts to create that feeling of orgasm. And I know that's something that you asked me about, like, you know, women that are struggling to orgasm and things like that. And how that looks for me is to recognize what an orgasm actually is. So like a lot of women come in and say, oh, I've never had an orgasm. And I think that there's like an idea about what an orgasm is. And what it usually, most women that think they can't orgasm are just having weaker orgasms.
Mm-hmm.
So all women can orgasm. Let's just get that myth out of the way. And it's like, how do we, because an orgasm to me is like the energy that is rippling through my body.
Mm. This is beautiful because I feel like there is a lot, you know, you look at all the online BS at the moment as well that you can kind of see, and there's a lot of shame around this that's being projected as sarcasm. But I'm noticing like that exact thing is like when we really tap into presence and we tap into feeling our body and actually being able to access what's going on for us, then we feel on a much deeper level everything, right? Emotions, feelings, needs, desires, and orgasms is one of them. But you see a lot like of memes and stuff going around right now where it's like, you know, a dig usually at the guy being like, oh, you know, where are you going, or home to orgasm, and like these weird memes around like a chick not being at orgasm with a guy, you know, and all of this kind of stuff. And that's like a different kind of conversation. But what I think we need to take responsibility for is that the present, like, are we present to our body? Are we willing to surrender? Do we feel safe? Do we, like, how is our body actually feeling? And I think what you're saying is so on point to what would land for a lot of women out there right now around. And it could be a confronting thing of like a hard truth to take of maybe it's our responsibility to tap into our own self-pleasure, to feel on a deeper level. And then that's when orgasms we can experience orgasms with other people. This is just like my opinion on this and my take and what I'm kind of seeing. I would love to get yours on that though.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So like there's kind of like those two are really interwoven for me. It's like the sex magic piece, the orgasm piece, and also like what we believe. You said something around like we need to feel safe in our bodies, you know, and those memes are accurate. It's like, and we're externalizing a feeling that we're having because we're going, okay, well, I've never been taught to be safe in my body, you know. So I feel the frustrations of these women. Like it's what's happening is this feeling of wanting to be able to connect to this this orgasmic energy and this release energy, because that's what the orgasmic energy is. It's like, so like orgasms are kind of like energy, right? We got emotion in the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And energy and emotions are just energy in motion. So
Right.
all emotions give us access to this life force energy.
Right.
And what's often happening in orgasms is actually we're fully clearing out the vessel, and at the same time allowing for these energies and new ideas to just drop in that same moment. So it's like, so that's actually why this was the potency of sex magic. Like, to come back to that, is like what we're doing is this, like, creating we're landing this idea and this intention of what we're actually wanting to call in into the body. And like, this is where it all happens, because there's actually no separation between where our bodies start and where this and where they stop, you know. Like, there's like the life I'm living and me, like there's no, it's, you know, microcosm to the macrocosm. That's basically what we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
And so when we start to realize that there's no separation from our bodies and our minds, all we need to do is get our mind in line with the heart, the gut, and the sex. And that's what an orgasm is doing. It's a full surrender to the experience of life in that moment and to yourself. So some women have struggle like surrendering to themselves and having an orgasm alone. Other women have struggles of like having orgasms with their partners. And really it's about like, it all comes back to the frequency of trust. And we have this idea that trust is actually happening outside of ourselves a lot of the time. Like, can't trust my partner, I'm not safe to go there with them. Or I can't trust, myself, I'm not safe to go into my own body or whatever. And it's like, actually this frequency of trust is like, it doesn't make, it's not an external experience. There's nothing outside of ourselves that creates trust. Like, trust is a frequency that lands in the body. You know, if you and I are friends and you break my trust, I don't automatically go, you can never be trusted again. Like, what happens is I feel into the moment with you and I go, all right, do I feel trust in my body? Because that's all it is. It's a feeling inside of my body whether I feel trust. And it doesn't actually matter what externally happens. Somebody could like do something to me over and over again, and it's really about how it feels in my body and about what I make that mean about whether I can trust them again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's never actually like, trust is not a tangible thing that we find in the world. And so actually when we start to recognize it's just a feeling in the body, and if we can trust that we can create what we want to create, then that's when things start to happen in fruition. So that's kind of how sex magic works. It's a bit of a long-winded kind of way of going around it, but that's
yeah.
the bit.
And I think it's an important one, you know. I think trust in general is an important pillar for everyone, whatever gender you identify as, and, you know, whatever experience you're having. But okay, so nailing this kind of down to the moment, what in the moment would the most beneficial thing to do be to check in first, whether you're about to have a moment with your partner or, you know, a lover, or if you're about to have a practice yourself, like a solo practice? Is the goal to first start with a feeling, with like that frequency of trust already there? And if it's not there, if you're like, I'm not actually, you know, I'm here with this lover and I'm not actually feeling trust, do we name it and then like have a conversation about it? Or do we, like, what would you do for the moment to be able to really cultivate that frequency so that we can have that experience that we want?
Well, I'd say that it starts with self and coming into our self-pleasure practice. So if like you're feeling a lack of trust and a lack of safety, it's actually getting to know trust and safety in your own bodies first. So like, so how that would look for me is I would like invoke, and you can do this with anything. Like, we've got a lot of words in the English language that don't actually come to anything tangible, right? So like there's words like devotion, commitment, loyalty, trust, like these things aren't like actual tangible things. And they're open for interpretation. And what they really are is like a feeling in the body when we come down to it. So what I do and what I ask women to do when they come and work with me is hold space for them to sort of journey with this. So it could start by like, you might start by doing a little bit of journaling about it, but like what you're wanting to do is just actually drop into the body and so go, think about a time that you felt safe. Like, let's say if we're going to use the word safety, safe's a good place to start. Yeah. So I might think about the word safety and I might drop into my body and go, when did I feel safe? I might think back to a time when I was a little girl, and I might have a vision of like, okay, when I was with my mom, when I was a little girl or something. And then I might just feel in the body, like, how do I remember feeling? Because this is actually how humans actually remember things as well. Like, it all comes back to how we feel. Like, you know, that saying, like, people will never remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
You know, it's because our bodies are like a sponge for feeling. Like, and that actually is like the main way that we store memory. So if you just come back to any kind of visualizations or memories of when you've experienced safety, and then you just try to remember what that felt like in your body and just kind of go into that experience, and then you just cultivate it, and you can make it become bigger, and you can actually like journey with it, and you can be with it. But what's often happening is people are you know, going outside of themselves all the time, going, okay, well, I feel safety with that ex-boyfriend. So, you know, and then it becomes almost like a cluster trigger. Yeah. Oh, well, that was with my ex-boyfriend. That's the only time I've ever felt safe. And then, you know, that was a great experience. And now he's left and now he doesn't love me, which means I don't mean anything, you know, so there's often like a cluster trigger that comes with those. And so what we're doing is actually just like really separating all these ideas from the thought and come back to the body, because that cluster trigger is just a train of thoughts. And if that chain of thoughts actually comes back to a feeling, it's like, let's say like, okay, I'll come back to safety in my body. I'm like, okay, I had a great experience of feeling safety with my mom, but then also I had that ex-boyfriend that made me feel safe, and now he's gone, you know? And then I might have to just resolve the feelings of sadness I have as I feel that feeling of my ex-boyfriend leaving, and I'll just be with that. And what we're doing is just like unpacking, you know, we're just going back down to the root of the feeling of safety. Because what's happened is we've actually tuned in, why we don't feel safe in the body is because we've attached that feeling of safety to sadness from the ex-boyfriend, or to frustration that he's not there anymore, or whatever the thing is. We can like bring it back to the purity of just the feeling itself, the sensation. That's when we can start to expand it in the body, and we can know it and we can be with it.
That's so good, because I think you said it before, like you said, like everything just comes back to a feeling, and like a trigger just comes back to this feeling, like, you know, and it's just like getting intimate with that. And you also said before, like you can't bypass it. Like if you're going into a self-pleasure experience, but that you've had a shit day or a really hard day and some stuff's going on, like you're probably not going to be able to go deep into your experience until you just feel what needs to be felt, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really key thing, is that I think a lot of people won't, or struggle with setting themselves the 30 minutes or doing or whatever, because they're scared of what might arise and scared of what they might have to sit and feel for a second. And I always remind myself when I'm going into these things, I'm like, it's only temporary. Like it's only temporary. I just get to feel it. And then that creates a release, and then it creates space for something new. And so it's like almost like having this courage to be able to sit in our own emotionality, then that's so uncertain and so unknown of what's going to arise, and being okay, and being okay to be there. And that's a hard thing for people, right?
Mm-hmm. Fully. That's really, and that's when we get to like the breaking down, right? So it's like when we can separate the sensations from what we're making it mean, that's liberation.
Mm.
Right? Because it's like, because when you realize it's just a sensation, like that's all it is. And like it's just like all you need to do is be with that sensation, and no sensation lasts forever. That's the beauty of sensations. Like it's just like it's moving and shifting in every single moment. So if you just be with that sensation, you bring, and all feelings just want to be felt. So this is the other thing as well. Like once a feeling has truly been felt, it will move. So anyone that gets stuck, everyone says to me, "No, I've been sad for 10 years." It's like that's the resistance to actually feeling the sadness rather than feeling the sadness itself. There's a guy, Joe Dispenza, you most probably know who he
Yeah.
is. So he talks about he's like a neuro guy, and he's just a chiropractor and everything, but he works on this. I think he works on sex magic, but don't tell anyone. He's like, he basically talks about manifestation and using these pieces, but what he says about emotions is like actually they only last 60 to 90 seconds in emotion. Everything else is our resistance to where or what we're making it mean.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so like when you recognize, actually, like you just get to be with it, whatever's there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
like,
then to back that up, John Wyland, one of my favorite teachers, he says, whatever you fully touch dissolves.
yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, like all these things just cross over because we're all speaking the same thing from a different angle. And
Yeah.
this is like what my journey has been around. It's like actually going, all those beautiful therapies and practices that are in the world, what would happen if we allowed sex to become a part of that? Because what's happening with sexuality is that we push it to the outskirts, like we do in society, right?
Yeah.
Hey, don't look at that, don't talk about that because it's inappropriate or it's not right. But that every time we do that, we're resisting our sexual energy. And if we keep repeating that pattern, then we wonder why we can't evoke it into a sexual experience, and why most people have stuff around sex and relating.
Absolutely. Oh, and so really this is, if anyone's kind of experienced any barriers to attracting their partner, or to sex with their partner, or to like bringing desire and passion back into their relationship, do you feel like it really starts with cultivating a solo practice or a self-pleasure practice first?
So you can do it with a partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd recommend, like for me, the best sexual experiences are when I'm fully able to be with my body, so then I can also connect to what's happening in their body. So like the more my body can be, I can be with whatever's there for me, and the more I can be in there, and then I can come back to that sort of emptiness in my body of like I've been with everything that's there, the more receptive I can be to whoever else's body I'm interacting with, right?
Sure.
So then if I want to be with if I want to work with a partner, it's like, what would happen if you guys created the space of self-pleasure together and actually started to create sexual like sex to be part of that experience that I'm saying, like really slowing down and feeling what the sensations are in each moment as you journey that. Because what's
Mm.
happening a lot of the time with sex is like we're bypassing like that stillness and all the emotions and everything that's there because it's so friggin' vulnerable. And we're using adrenaline to kind of push past that. So when we use adrenaline to push past what we're really feeling, then it creates it creates this experience of like trying to like we're missing the most of what's actually there to play with.
Yeah.
We don't want to get vulnerable to it. And
Yeah.
sex is a super vulnerable space because it's like you're actually opening up all of you, not just your mind. Like your mind's the first part, and then you go into all your body. And if you're not ever with just your body, like how much more vulnerable is it going to be when you ask somebody else to be with your body with you?
Yeah. I think it goes back to that thing too. Like if you're already not comfortable, then you're not going to be able to hold anybody else's, right? Like
Exactly.
the deeper you can be able to hold your own stuff, it's the same as the deeper you're able to feel your own emotion, then all of a sudden somebody's having a really deep emotional experience and you're not running from that, or you're not like shutting it down or saying like you'll be right. Like it's like you're allowing somebody to be with theirs because you can be with yours. And I think that is so freaking key right now. Like I'm really passionate about this because I recognize how quickly we shut down kids or friends or family or lovers or whoever it is because it's making us feel uncomfortable, and then it's shaming their emotional experience. And I think that's where, you know, we have to kind of get better at vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard. I get it totally.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Mm. This is so good. This is so juicy. What, like, I have a question for you in terms of your own experience, if you're open to sharing. Like, what happened for you when you began working on this yourself? Like, how did it really shift your life?
Mm. It shifted everything for me. Like when I first kind of experienced this, it was like I was in a really, really bad stage of my life. I was in a very like abusive relationship, and what was happening for me was I felt like I had nothing more to give. And then I kind of journeyed into this and like into this moment where I started to feel like that tiny like spark,
Mm.
which is like in my body of like, actually I can do this and I can make change. And then I just like sat with that sensation, that tiny fire, and I just cultivated that fire every day so I could get out of that bad experience in my life to create change. And then so just by cultivating that little sensation, that little part of me that had like, and I had nothing to give anybody at that time in my life. I was so exhausted, and I like found this tiny spark of hope inside of me, and I just cultivated that over and over until it started to transform. And now it's like a roaring fire, and I get to be with that every day and wake up with that feeling and that roaring fire that has me want to come out here and create and talk to you guys about how we can all do this. So I mean, it's completely transformed my life. It's completely transformed all the lives of the women that I've ever worked with, as well as men as well. But I'm currently running a school where I'm training all these women to become these practitioners for this modality, and they're just seeing massive transformations in their life, and you know, breaking down barriers with money, breaking down barriers with partnerships, and all these pieces, and just coming alive to who they really be.
Because it's all so linked, isn't it? Like all of the issues are so linked.
Yeah,
And when we can unblock something that's within ourselves, like it just opens up, like I think you mentioned it earlier, like it opens up so much room for abundance and us to receive the thing that we want.
yeah, totally. That's what, and I'm really a believer of that. If we're going to use the strongest creation energy in our body, like that's how we create change. We use that life force energy that I'm speaking of. Good. And when you knock out, I found that any block that anyone has in their life as well can be drawn back to their sexuality. So when you clear it from the root, from like the root of the problem, you start to see impact in the other areas.
Mm. And I would say, because I'm in this work right now for myself, like I would also say that sometimes it needs to get messy before it gets better, right? Like when you dive into this work, it brings up so many blind spots, it brings up so many things that you were like didn't even have awareness around, and that stuff feels tricky first. And then, but like when you said everything's temporary, you know, like the sensations are temporary, like all this stuff, like sometimes you just have to go back and feel some stuff that you bypassed maybe a long time, maybe ancestral stuff, who knows, but you have to kind of go through a healing process to then come out the other end. And so it's like, that's why I'm passionate about having this conversation. That's why I'm so grateful for the work that you do, because people need to know that they are supported in this space when they're going through it, because there's so much amazingness on the other side of it, but you also have to have someone holding your hand through it.
Exactly.
Oh, I love it. And I also love that you said you just had this hope, like you just held on to this bit of hope, because sometimes that's all we need. Like sometimes, and this feels fresh for me right now, is like when there's so much chaos going on, but you can just hold on to that bit of hope. Like that's sometimes all you need. And that, I think, is so even more powerful when it comes from within, when it's like not somebody else giving you the hope. It's like you still feel that little flame inside, and now you're just like blazing. And I think that's freaking powerful. Oh,
Yeah.
where can people go?
Yeah, that willpower that's like beyond the mind, it's like it's a sensation, right?
Yeah. Where can people go to like get connected to your work and find out more about what you're doing?
So on Instagram it's just Victoria Redbard, so if you want to check me out on there, and victoriaredbard.com, also on Facebook Victoria Redbard. So Facebook, Instagram, my website. There's many, like I got some free giveaways. I'd love to offer to, I don't know how you send these podcasts out, but I have like tips for self-pleasure.
Oh,
And
amazing. I can link it in the show notes, could I?
yeah, let's do that. So just
Cool.
give people something to start with, I think would be really helpful.
Yes, that would be epic. Amazing. And thank you so much. And I'll link all of that up so people know where to find you, so they can go to the show notes to get all of that info. And one last question I have for you is, what would you say is blazing or alive on your heart right now?
I just feel like a really strong pull to want to bring tantra and like this experience of like this sort of new way, this new paradigm of like intimacy into like the business space.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me right now, what's really like on my heart is like, what would it be like if we actually were deeply intimate with ourselves? How would we be able to show up for our clients and for the people that we love and like also feel like that there's no like separation between like the love we have for our families and the love that we have for our clients, like that for me is like, I kind of want to abolish all this kind of like cold energy that I feel in the business place. So, and to like this feel just like that business is for people and for and to experience more love in that way. Like, yeah, I don't know how to explain it. I'm calling it like, new paradigm of business, new paradigm of intimacy, tantra for high performance. How do we experience more balance in our lives and more that peak performance state by using these tantric practices?
Yes, I
Quite
love that.
related, but it's in my body for sure.
Yes. And it, like, as you were talking about it, gave me goosebumps. So excited to see how that unfolds. But I so appreciate you and everything that you're doing. And thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Amazing. Thank you, Han. Bye.